When we think about forests in South America, our first thought might be the Amazon rainforest. But did you know there's another unique forest with many endemic species? The Atlantic forest. It covers regions of eastern Brazil, but also reaches eastern Paraguay and northeastern Argentina. We met Dr. Victor Zwiener from the Federal University of Paraná in Brazil to learn more about this highly biodiverse and precious ecosystem.
When people think about the Atlantic forest, they usually imagine a rainforest, very diverse, and this is partially true, but actually the Atlantic forest is a group of ecosystems, many ecosystems that merge together and they have species in common. So it is very diverse. It's probably one of the most diverse tropical forests in the world, and is widespread all over Brazil. So when you think about Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, the major big cities in Brazil, most of them are within the Atlantic forest. So it has a very important role in ecosystem services and also the identity of Brazilians, because most of the population lives within the Atlantic forest domain. Palmheart, Euterpe edulis, it's very present all over its distribution. It's more abundant in the southern parts, up to the middle. But like I said, it's a combination of different species, and there's turnover, a lot of turnover of species. So the species that we may find here in southern Brazil, where we are now, are most likely different than species we find in the northern part of the Atlantic forest. So there's a lot of change in the species composition. So I'd say that the palmheart represents tropical and represents the Atlantic forest. The first thing that the Europeans did when they arrived to Brazil was probably cut some trees and start colonizing the coast. I mean by Europeans, because obviously there were some indigenous people living here already. So the Atlantic forest has suffered a series of cycles of impacts. So starting back when the Europeans arrived, and that led to different types of impacts. For instance, cutting trees was the first one, and then later we went through coffee plantations, sugarcane plantations, coal, and this type of impacts. Mining is also very important, but I'd say that deforestation was one of the major ones, and nowadays we see a lot of fragments and small isolated patches of forests. So that's a major impact that is all over the Atlantic forest, and that is now in synergy with climate change, which has been already impacting the forest, and we can measure and feel the impacts of climate change. So both threats together, they represent a very intense and concern for the species and diversity that is known for this domain, for this forest. I think there are different people in different communities and academic institutions working toward this conservation. So I think Brazil has a very strong ecological and conservation school, and I can see that the population and the society overall, it's more and more concerned about the environment. So in a way, I am somehow positive that slowly we may be able to reach and conserve and preserve what we have left. However, we feel that we will not be able to meet the requirements for its conservation unless we have a very strong and very coordinated actions toward this conservation. It's not only about saving paper or not using as much plastic or doing small little things that people do that will save this forest. It's actually, we need much more than that. We need incentives. We need all fronts, from governments, from institutions, from the academia, from society. Everything needs to be very orchestrated towards this goal. Otherwise, we may not reach and we may not save the species. So we know that some species are already suffering from climate change, and that means that we need to find where these species are safe And those sites need to be preserved and need to be looked after and restored potentially. Well, I can look back to my career. I still feel a little awkward to answer these questions because I feel myself I'm early career. Of course, it's relative to what you're comparing to, who you're comparing to. But I remember when I was a student in biology back in the early 2000s, I was always interested about different things, different animals, different plants, and different things in ecology. So I liked ecology overall, and it was really difficult to me to decide which way to go. So my advice would be just interact with as much people as you can. If you're working with plants and a friend of yours is doing some field work with animals, just go with them and do some field work with them so you know what it is to work with different types of organisms. So interact with people, help people, and just find what you're passionate about. So that will be easier for you to work hard and maybe work a little extra to just stand as someone that is productive and doing a lot. So maybe my advice would be that, because obviously we depend on opportunities, and these opportunities, they are more often available to us when we interact with different people and we have different options of choices to take. My passion about the Atlantic forest started when I was young and going to the nature overall, to the forest, just just camp out and be in a waterfall, go to the ocean, and that drove me to start studying and working towards this conservation. So I have lots of memories that make me want to share, but I think the most recent one that I had was when I was in a meeting in Rio de Janeiro. There's an island called Ilha Grande, so big island. It is an island off the coast of Rio de Janeiro. It's a large conservation unit. Actually, it's more than one. And we had a meeting there in a very specific beach called Dois Rios. So it's a place that used to be a prison, a federal prison, back in the days, in the 50s and 80s. I think it was deactivated in the 80s. And there's a research station there. So and then just a few researcher fellows were there, and we were discussing ecology and discussing how to proceed with the projects, and that in this unique, very nice environment and tropical forest, and that just motivates us a lot to work harder and to think of different ideas and different projects. So that just reminds me of how good it is to work in nature and work in nice environments, and how much people need to be in touch with nature and to actually feel what we were feeling back then.